I never thought my 66th birthday would be the day my son's betrayal came crashing down on me. Reverend Bird's church hall had maybe 50 people in it. Lenora clinked her glass for attention. "Are you enjoying that $500,000 trust fund?" she asked loud enough for the folding chairs in the back to hear. I was halfway through my lemon cake when I froze, fork in midair. "What trust fund?" I said out loud. Marcus's hand slipped and his fork clattered against his plate. Simone's smile collapsed like wet paper. Every conversation stopped. The music from the Bluetooth speaker hiccuped as someone bumped the table. I locked eyes with Marcus. He blinked fast, face tight, lips parted like he might lie or cry. I couldn't tell which. Simone, still dressed like a buckhead housewife in 4-inch heels, wouldn't even meet my gaze. Just reached for her wine and drank like it could hide her. I stood up. "Lenora, what trust fund are you talking about?" My voice cracked, and I hated that it did. She looked confused. "The one from Uncle Jonah's estate. Didn't Marcus tell you? That lawyer called my house by mistake last month asking for your new number. He said the disbursements had gone out in June." June. I gripped the back of my chair. My birthday was October 19th. That meant 4 months had passed, and not a single word had come to me. I looked again at my son, the same boy I'd raised on government cheese and clearance school shoes, and he just stared down at his plate like the peas on it were speaking. I put down my plate, walked across the room, and hugged Reverend Bird with both arms. "Thank you for the cake, I'm heading out." She didn't ask questions. She saw my hands were shaking, and that was enough. On the drive home, I kept the radio off. My mind wasn't quiet, though. I was counting. Rent due on the 5th. My Social Security deposit on the 3rd. $112 left in checking. And, somewhere out there, a trust fund with my name on it. By midnight, I had pulled the folder with Uncle Jonah's will out of my closet safe. Everything seemed intact. Notarized, my name spelled right. Executor, Marcus L. Johnson. A note in Jonah's handwriting. "Take care of her. No one else will." I slid that note into my purse and zipped it shut. 2 weeks earlier, on October 5th, I was at home balancing my budget on a yellow legal pad, still pinching pennies off my $1,200 Social Security check, never suspecting that anything about my inheritance from Uncle Jonah's estate, finalized last spring, was being tampered with. My routine was the same every first Thursday. Cereal at 7, Bible study notes open by 9, banking by noon. I had 2 coupons clipped for Kroger and $86.17 left until next deposit. I spent most of that morning cross-checking the MARTA card refill, utility auto pay, and an outstanding dental balance from a cracked crown. The folder labeled Jonah hadn't been touched since May, when Marcus told me the probate process would be slow and mostly symbolic, since Jonah hadn't owned much. But I kept the papers anyway. The will, funeral invoice, a business card from Denton Graves Law, because old habits die hard. Back when I worked for the housing department, I'd seen grown men lose apartments over 2 missing pages. I wasn't about to let my life unravel over an assumption. Still, Marcus had looked me in the eye 3 different times and told me, "It's just a lot of red tape. I'll let you know when anything changes." He even offered to, quote, "handle the correspondence," since I was, in his words, already doing too much for your age. I took that as concern back then. Now I'm not so sure. That October afternoon, I brewed a second cup of coffee and sat down again with the calculator. I wasn't broke, but I wasn't free either. The kind of freedom Jonah had meant when he told me, years ago, "One day, I'm going to put you in a position where nobody can ask you for anything." He said it after my 3rd loan to Marcus. I remember I'd waved it off, saying, "He's your nephew, too." And Jonah had looked me dead in the eye and said, "That boy's got 2 hustles, charm and guilt." At 3 p.m., I opened the top drawer where I keep all correspondence. Still no mail from Graves and Associates, though I remembered seeing their return address recently. I brushed it off. Maybe it was a mix-up, or something to do with taxes. What I didn't realize then, what I should have clocked, was how quiet Marcus had gone lately. No calls, no check-ins, no borrowed car. When Simone texted me a blurry picture of her nails with the caption, "Self-Care Saturday," I barely registered the backdrop. A marble counter, high-end faucet, too nice for their little Kirkwood condo. Over the summer, I'd asked Marcus 3 separate times if there were any updates from Jonah's probate attorney, And each time he'd said, nothing much, just a lot of red tape. But the final straw was when I found an empty certified letter envelope in the trash with Denton Graves' law firm seal still intact. It was late July when I found it, tucked between a crumpled pizza receipt and a torn Bed Bath & Beyond flyer in their kitchen trash can. I'd stopped by the condo after Simone asked if I could check on the plumbing while they were in Alpharetta for some brunch event. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with the gold-stamped return address I remembered from Jonah's will packet. No recipient label. No contents, just the seal and a single postmark dated June 7th. I held it for a long moment, trying to explain it away. Maybe they'd received something unrelated. Maybe Marcus had meant to show me but forgot. But that little voice in my gut, the one I used to trust when tenants claimed they'd mailed in paperwork that never arrived, kept whispering, "He's not telling you something." I didn't take the envelope with me. I didn't even mention it. I put it back exactly as I'd found it, wiped the counter down, and left the condo with my hands shaking. That night, I replayed every conversation we'd had since May, listening for the parts that no longer sounded like care. The, "Don't worry about it, Mama." The, "You'll just get stressed over nothing." The, "Simone and I are helping you, remember?" I wasn't helped. I was managed. Back at my apartment, I opened the metal lockbox in my closet where I kept copies of Jonah's estate paperwork and went line by line through every item again. I checked the probate court summary. Yes, it named Marcus as executor, but the beneficiary field was clear: Gloria Mae Johnson. No co-beneficiaries, no stipulations. Just my name. Alone. The more I stared at that envelope in my mind, the more wrong it felt. Legal mail doesn't vanish for no reason, and Marcus never mentioned a certified delivery. It wasn't just negligence, it was concealment. The next morning, I checked my Gmail inbox. Nothing. No forward, no scanned attachments, no contact from Graves. Then I remembered the library had desktop access with fewer filters than my old phone. The decision made itself. That night, I searched my email inbox and found nothing, so the next morning I walked 2 blocks to the library to use the public desktop and sent a formal request to Mr. Graves for a copy of all estate disbursement records under my name. It was a Friday morning, cool but bright. I didn't bother with makeup, just pulled on my walking shoes and brought the manila folder marked Jonah Legal with me. The library's computer lab had 8 terminals, half of them occupied by teenagers in hoodies pretending to study. I logged in with my card number and opened a new Gmail draft. I typed slow, careful, like I used to when I helped tenants file. Section 8 appeals, double-checking dates, spelling, punctuation. Dear Mr. Graves, I wrote, I am the listed beneficiary of Jonah L. Bryant's estate. As of this date, I have received no direct documentation or access credentials pertaining to any trust or account associated with his final will and testament. Please confirm the current status of any disbursements or accounts in my name and provide full documentation of all related transactions. I read it twice before hitting send. Then I printed the message, time-stamped it, and placed the copy in the folder under a new tab I'd labeled Correspondence. Not assumption, not hearsay. Paper trail. When I stood to leave, a teenage boy in the back row looked up from his game screen and said, "You type fast for somebody old." I smiled without smiling. I type fast because I paid attention. On the walk home, I stopped by the corner store for a roll of quarters and a notepad. My apartment wasn't fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 full bath, linoleum peeling near the fridge. But it was clean and quiet, and for now, it was my war room. I cleared off the dining table, laid out the trust paperwork, the postmarked envelope I'd photographed, and my printed email. Then I added one more sheet, handwritten, known dates. June 6th, postmark. June 9th, Marcus visited. July 3rd, Simone posted a spa day selfie in a white robe, the background full of marble and gold trim. I'd ignored the clues at the time, but now I was paying attention. I knew enough to stop trusting memory alone. I wanted everything printed, labeled, dated. If there was theft, it wasn't going to stay a family matter. It was going to become a record. And now the record had begun. On October 10th, Mr. Graves called me directly and said, "Mrs. Johnson, according to our records, you've had access to a trust account with $500,000 since June 6th. Didn't Marcus forward you the trustee credentials?" Which made my skin crawl. I was standing by the stove, halfway through stirring grits, when my phone lit up with a 404 number I didn't recognize. I answered out of habit, expecting a telemarketer or someone from the pharmacy. Instead, I heard a man's voice, polite but firm, asking to confirm if he was speaking with Gloria Mae Johnson, beneficiary of the Jonah L. Bryant Trust. The pan went cold under my hand. I turned off the burner and sat down. Mr. Graves didn't waste time. He said he'd received my email, reviewed the estate records, and confirmed that the trust account had been opened under my Social Security number, listing me as sole beneficiary. Access had been granted through a secured portal, with temporary login credentials sent to the executor, Marcus, per standard procedure. When I told him I'd never seen a login, never even been notified about a trust being finalized, he hesitated. I was under the impression you'd been managing the account since early June, he said. I asked him to repeat the transaction date, June 6th, the same week I saw Marcus and Simone for brunch, the same visit where Simone insisted I didn't need to bring anything, said she'd already picked up a fruit tray. With your card, hope that's okay. He offered to resend the original welcome packet and transaction summary directly to me. I gave him my correct email and requested hard copies be mailed as well. Before we ended the call, I asked a final question. Was my signature required anywhere for account access? Yes, he replied. On the power of attorney paperwork, Marcus submitted back in April. That's how the trustee credentials were released. April. I ended the call and sat in silence. I hadn't signed anything in April. Not for Marcus, not for anyone, and I certainly hadn't granted power of attorney. I grabbed my pen, flipped to a fresh notepad page, and wrote 2 words in block letters, forgery suspected. Then I underlined the date, June 6th, and boxed it in red ink. Whatever love I still held for Marcus had started to rot the moment Mr. Graves said, "Didn't he send you the credentials?" That afternoon, I went to Bank of America on Moreland Avenue, requested a printout of all activity under the Jonah L. Bryant Memorial Trust, and the manager, Ms. Tasha Green, handed me a 12-page transaction history showing 3 wire transfers totaling $320,000 sent to an account ending in 7,892 under Simone's name. I didn't call first. I walked straight in, folder in hand, wearing the same beige cardigan I used to wear for court support visits. The branch smelled like paper and printer toner. No music, no chatter. I went straight to the help desk and asked for the branch manager. When Ms. Green appeared, sharp suit, calm eyes, I told her I needed trust account activity under my name. She asked for ID and the account reference. I handed her Mr. Graves' printed summary with my Social Security number and trust title. She studied it carefully, then nodded, and led me behind the frosted glass divider. "Let me verify your identity and the authorization attached to this trust," she said. I sat quiet as she keyed in details, pausing only to glance back at me when something didn't match. Finally, she turned the screen toward herself, clicked twice, then pressed print. She returned with a stack of pages clipped together. "Here's the activity," she said. Transactions began June 8th. 3 outgoing wires, significant amounts, all tied to a secondary user profile. Not you. I didn't speak. I scanned the first page. There it was. Wire transfer. $120,000. June 8th. Recipient S. Johnson. Account. Asterisk. 7,892. Another 2 on July 12th and August 3rd. One for $95,000. The last for $105,000. I flipped through page after page, each one colder than the last. Boutique furniture, a Mercedes lease, consulting fees. None of it made sense under Jonah's will. "Can I get a full copy of these?" I asked. She nodded. "I'll have them notarized if needed." I slid the stack into my folder, then asked for one more thing. The application record tied to that secondary user, Simone M. Johnson. Ms. Green confirmed after a pause. Added by power of attorney, April 15th. Not even her husband. Not my son. Her. I left the bank with proof in my hands and a pressure in my chest I hadn't felt since the day I got my foreclosure warning back in 1998. This wasn't a mistake. It was a siphon, and I'd just traced the pipe back to the source. I went home, printed every page, and used my old housing casework skills to build a labeled timeline color-coded by date, account holder, transaction ID, with a red tab on the June 9th email Marcus had forwarded me that I now realized was doctored. The living room table became a workbench. I cleared everything: mail, remotes, coffee mug rings. I pulled out my retired counselor toolkit: stapler, highlighters, sticky tabs, a 3-hole punch, my old Franklin binder. For 2 decades, I documented tenant evictions, subsidy delays, appeals, re-inspections. This wasn't new territory. Paper tells on people when memory won't. Each transaction from Ms. Green's stack got its own line on the spreadsheet: date, amount, recipient, transfer type, source account. I created separate columns for every relevant detail: disbursement, ID, fee charged, internal routing stamp. That $320,000 didn't disappear. It was moved, strategically and fast, through accounts Marcus and Simone had clearly prepared for this. I mapped out how quickly it left: 3/4 gone in 60 days. The email from Marcus dated June 9th had bothered me from the start. I'd found it again that morning, buried under a Walgreens receipt in my inbox. The subject line read, FYI, trust stuff from Graves. Inside was a message with vague wording: just wanted to loop you in, and one attachment labeled, Welcome Packet Final, PDF. No real salutation, no direct instructions. But what stood out now was the email domain. The sender line ended in @graves-legal.net, but when I hovered over it, the actual address revealed itself: majohnson.personalmail@outlook.com. He had faked the forward. I screenshotted the metadata, saved it as a PDF, and labeled it Email Forgery, June 9th. I printed that and added it to the binder, behind the tab marked Communications. Next, I flagged Simone's wire transfers and created a second tab labeled Disbursements. Each transaction was paired with a matching expense post: a luxury brand receipt, a tagged social media photo, a property listing that matched a deposit date. I wasn't just building a case, I was closing gaps. When you've spent a life being underestimated, documentation becomes armor. By 9 p.m., I had 3 full tabs, a table full of notes, and a growing sense of rage that didn't roar. It calcified. They had planned this, together. And they thought I wouldn't catch it because I read paper instead of screens. 3 days later, I confronted Marcus privately at their Kirkwood condo, and when I asked directly about the funds, Simone stepped in and said, "We assumed you didn't want the pressure." And Marcus muttered, "It was just sitting there," which told me everything. I didn't call ahead. I waited until a Tuesday morning when I knew Simone worked remotely and Marcus was usually home tinkering with his side projects, whatever those were now. I dressed plainly. No jewelry, no earrings, no makeup to soften the edge, just slacks, a button-up blouse, and my documents in a zip binder tucked under my arm. I rang the buzzer and waited. Marcus opened the door like nothing was wrong. "Hey, Ma," he said, casual, stepping aside to let me in without asking what brought me there. Simone was at the dining table, laptop open, manicure fresh. She didn't stand, just offered a half smile and said, "You want coffee?" I declined. I didn't sit either. I stood in the center of their open-concept living room, binder in hand. I need to know what happened to Jonas Trust. All of it, start to finish. Marcus's face dropped its polite expression so fast I saw the muscles tense beneath it. "What are you talking about?" he asked, already lying. I set the binder on the coffee table and opened it to the first tab. The trust summary from Mr. Graves, followed by the bank printouts. Don't play dumb. I have documentation. 3 wire transfers, a forged email, a power of attorney form I never signed. Talk. Simone clicked her laptop shut and leaned back, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "We assumed you didn't want the pressure, Gloria," she said smoothly, as if that explained financial theft. "You've been stressed. You figured you'd help yourselves to $300,000? I cut in. Marcus looked away. "It was just sitting there. You didn't even know about it. And whose fault is that?" His silence was the answer. I took out the email printout and laid it down gently. "This came from your Outlook, not Mr. Graves. You faked a legal message." He didn't deny it, didn't look at me. Simone crossed her legs, shrugged like it was an unfortunate misunderstanding, and not a felony. We meant well. That line, meant well, stuck in my ears like static. I snapped the binder shut. You have one chance to fix this before it gets out of your control. I won't ask again. Neither of them moved. I took screenshots of Marcus's June 9th email header metadata, incomplete domain, a July 3rd Zelle receipt for $40,000 to a consultant, and a canceled check from Simone's joint account used for a down payment on a $640,000 Buckhead property deeded in her name only. After the confrontation, I didn't waste time. They weren't going to confess. They were going to wait me out, hope I'd get tired or embarrassed or scared. But I'd worked too many eviction cases where tenants were told the paperwork had gone missing to believe that silence meant safety. I opened my laptop, signed into my backup Gmail, and pulled up the June 9th email again. I used an email header analysis tool, the kind IT at the Housing Authority had trained us on years ago, and isolated the return path. It wasn't Graves and Associates. It wasn't even a spoofed domain. It was Marcus's personal address, routed through a template generator. No authentication key, no secure send tag, no encrypted attachment. I saved every screen, named each file by date and sender, and printed them in triplicate. Then I turned to the transaction history again and started lining up each wire with the outward trails. The July 3rd Zelle payment jumped out immediately. $40,000 sent to someone labeled D. Carter Consulting. I searched the name and within minutes found a matching LLC registered just 6 weeks prior. Business purpose listed as real estate advisory, with a downtown virtual address and no website. A shell company. That $40,000 didn't go to a consultant. It went to a gatekeeper. On August 15th, another flag. A certified check withdrawal for $80,000 issued from Simone and Marcus's joint account. I cross-referenced the routing number with public property records. 10 days later, a deed was filed under Simone's name for a newly renovated 5-bedroom house in Buckhead. Purchase price, $640,000. Lender, private, short-term, likely bridge loan. Down payment, nearly exact to the check amount. And there it was. The house, the spa day, the designer posts on social media, all funded by what they assumed I'd never ask about. I made separate folders: forgery, wire transfers, asset acquisition. I even burned backups onto a flash drive and mailed one copy to myself, unopened, for postmarked legal proof. If they tried to destroy records, I had a dated envelope ready to present. No more wondering. No more confronting. This had moved from suspicion to strategy. The shock hit hardest when I contacted Mr. Graves again, and he told me that Marcus had presented power of attorney documents for me, dated April 2024, with a signature that wasn't mine, and had used them to initiate disbursement. I called his office early, before my second cup of coffee, and was surprised when Mr. Graves answered himself. No assistant, no screening, just a quiet voice asking how he could help. I explained that I'd reviewed the disbursements, identified inconsistencies, and needed to verify the basis for account access. He didn't sound surprised, just tired. I can send you the original power of attorney paperwork Marcus submitted. He offered. Please do, I said, already opening a fresh folder on my desk titled Forged Authority. The document arrived within the hour, a scanned PDF marked Executed April 11th, 2024. My full name appeared in bold, with my social security number and former address on Memorial Drive. Below that, a thick signature that was supposed to be mine, next to Marcus's neatly written name. The notary stamp was blurred, tilted. The signature wasn't even close. Too rounded, too slow. It looked traced. My real signature tilts left and cuts off fast, the product of 30 years signing tenant forms on the go. This one looked like someone mimicking handwriting from a check. I checked the notary commission number in the Georgia Secretary of State database. Expired as of March 2023. I called Graves back. Did no one verify the notary? He paused. At the time, it appeared in order. We were under pressure to distribute before the fiscal close. I didn't reply. That wasn't a reason, that was a shortcut. I zoomed in on the timestamp metadata embedded in the PDF. The creation date read April 13th, 2 days after the stated execution. So it had been backdated, then uploaded. That night, I reviewed every signature I'd submitted in the past 5 years: driver's license renewal, voter registration form, tax filings. I scanned 3 of them and created a comparison sheet. I labeled each line clearly: verified, forged, source. Then I printed everything and slid it into the folder behind a red divider labeled Key Evidence. I didn't need to speculate anymore. They hadn't just manipulated me. They'd impersonated me. Legally. From that moment, my path shifted. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about fraud. I filed an immediate fraud alert with the Fulton County Recorder's Office, had the notary's stamp verified, it was expired, and then visited Reverend Byrd to prepare a private mediation invitation letter to Marcus and Simone for November 1st. At the recorder's office, I didn't ask for help. I walked in with my folder, took a number, and filled out the fraud report using their terminal full legal name, document in question, date of alleged execution, and uploaded the image of the expired notary seal. I listed the notary ID and linked it to the expired commission pulled from the state's online registry. No theatrics, no anger, just the truth, entered line by line. The clerk stamped the submission, handed me a receipt with a reference code, and told me someone from the fraud division would contact me within 5 business days. After that, I took a MARTA bus to First Light AME. Reverend Byrd greeted me in her office, her reading glasses halfway down her nose and her tablet open to a budget spreadsheet. She looked up once she saw my face and closed the tablet without a word. "I need help drafting a formal notice," I said, placing the binder on her desk. "For mediation, before I take this to court." She didn't blink. "They came to your birthday and smiled in your face," she said quietly. "Let's write it." We sat together for 2 hours. I dictated the timeline. She typed. Her language was calm but firm. Alleged misappropriation, unauthorized disbursement, revocation of trust access. The meeting was set for November 1st, 3 p.m., in the church hall. Parties: Gloria Mae Johnson, Marcus Johnson, Simone Johnson. Witnesses: legal representative, clergy observer, HOA officer. A neutral location. No room for excuses. Before I left, Reverend Byrd placed her hand over mine. "You sure you're ready for what this opens up?" I nodded. "I'm ready for what's already happened." That evening, I mailed 2 copies of the letter via certified USPS, one to their condo, one to Marcus's P.O. box listed on the trust. I kept the receipts, both with tracking codes, and filed them under a new tab labeled Notices Sent, Deadline Issued, Clock Ticking. They had 19 days to face me properly. If they didn't come willingly, the next papers would come from a judge. That night, alone in my kitchen with the blinds closed, I let the tears fall for the first time. Not for the money, but for the insult of being erased and underestimated before standing up and locking down every point of financial access. PINs changed, POAs revoked, online portals secured. I don't cry easy. 30 years in housing enforcement will burn that out of you. But once the final notice was in the mail and the weight of what I'd uncovered settled, the grief came on fast. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea gone cold, hands resting on the binder like it was an anchor. I didn't cry for Jonah. He'd done right by me in the end. I cried for the way my own son had slid into entitlement like it was his inheritance, not mine. No fight, no shouting, just silence, then action. I pulled out my old laptop. Slow, dented, reliable. First, I changed every single password. Bank, social security portal, email, credit bureau access. I created unique PINs for each account and stored them in a new encrypted file labeled Post Breach 2024. Then I called my credit union and revoked Marcus's secondary card. The woman on the line asked if I'd like to make this removal permanent. I said yes, clearly. Next was the IRS. I requested a fraud alert be placed on my identity profile. Then I locked down my credit report through all 3 bureaus. They offered a temporary freeze. I opted for a permanent one. If anyone tried to open so much as a Macy's account in my name, it would raise a flag. After that, I logged into the Georgia State portal and submitted a digital form to revoke all previously filed powers of attorney, even the legitimate ones. From here on, nothing would be assumed. I would control every line. At midnight, I opened the envelope from Jonah one last time. His handwriting had faded, but the message hadn't. Take care of her, no one else will. He hadn't been wrong. Before going to bed, I unplugged the Wi-Fi router, printed backup copies of the new passwords, and stored the binder in a fireproof lockbox. I turned the bolt on my front door and added a second lock, one I installed myself that only I had the key to. On the morning of November 1st, with Reverend Bird, Mr. Graves, and Mrs. Langston from the HOA all present at the church hall, I laid out fresh folders for everyone, labeled Asset Flow, Forged Documents, and Trust Communications, and told Marcus I expected truth before 3 p.m. or I'd escalate to litigation. I arrived an hour early, carrying a rolling case and a tote bag, each packed with color-coded files, extra copies, and a digital recorder. The fellowship hall had folding chairs set in a ring, not a courtroom row, but the pressure was there all the same. I chose a square table at the center and began arranging the evidence in folders marked with bold tabs. Asset Flow held the transaction timeline, wire receipts, and bank account trails. Forged documents contained the fake power of attorney, the expired notary stamp, the signature comparisons. Trust Communications held email screenshots, metadata breakdowns, and call transcripts. Reverend Bird placed a pitcher of water in the center, then quietly positioned herself behind me. Mr. Graves arrived carrying a slim briefcase. Mrs. Langston, from the HOA board, brought a notebook and 2 pens. She wasn't there for legal purposes, but to act as a neutral witness, a woman with a sharp memory and a keener tongue, especially when someone disrespected property lines or community trust. At 2:52 p.m., Marcus and Simone walked in together, both dressed like they were headed to brunch, not confrontation. Marcus wore a blazer over a black t-shirt, his expression practiced. Simone had on another one of her statement handbags, crocodile print this time, and sunglasses she didn't remove. No greetings were exchanged. I gestured toward the seats. Take one. Sit down. Marcus pulled out a chair slowly. Simone stayed standing for a moment too long, like she was calculating if she could spin the room in her favor. She couldn't. Not with this many eyes watching. I slid the folders across the table. Each of you can read what's inside, but we won't waste time pretending you don't know what this is. I want the full truth by 3 o'clock. After that, I hand this entire file to a judge. Simone reached for the folder without a word. Marcus didn't move. The church bell chimed once above us. 7 minutes to deadline. In that silent, echoing hall, with every chair filled and every ally present, I placed the forged power of attorney and the flagged notary seal in the center of the table, while Simone clutched her purse and Marcus said, "Mom, please don't do this here." I didn't respond. I let the documents speak first. The forged signature was enlarged, laminated, and clipped to an authenticated sample from my tax return. Beneath it, I'd included the Notary Commission expiration, pulled from the Secretary of State's database. Side by side, the truth cut deeper than any raised voice could have. Mr. Graves leaned forward and adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Langston didn't flinch, just wrote something down in her neat, looping print. Simone broke first. "You're making this look worse than it was." I turned to her. "There's no version of this that looks good. You presented a forged legal instrument. You initiated transfers from a trust that wasn't yours. You bought real estate with my name on the line and didn't think I'd ask where the money came from." Marcus exhaled sharply and looked toward Reverend Bird like she might intervene, soften the blow. She didn't. She kept her arms folded, back straight, eyes on me. "I didn't know the paperwork was forged," Marcus said. "Simone handled that part." I thought, "Don't," I said, cutting the excuse at the root. "You were executor. That was your duty. You saw my name. You saw my face. But you gave someone else my voice." He finally looked up. I didn't want to fight. "I figured you wouldn't know how to manage that kind of money." "You mean the money I lived without while you shopped Buckhead zip codes with my name on the deed?" He didn't answer. Simone crossed her arms and muttered, "You'll get the rest of it." Mrs. Langston cleared her throat. "That's not how restitution works, dear." Mr. Graves stood slowly. "Based on what's presented here, the trust account will be frozen today. I will initiate a formal investigation. Unauthorized transactions tied to forged documents will be subject to recovery through civil action. Restitution isn't optional." Simone's jaw tightened. Marcus reached for the folder, but I placed my hand over it before he could pull it back. This stays with me. 3 o'clock struck. The second hand stopped being generous. I walked them through the receipts. First, the doctored email Marcus sent, then the bank wire trail, then the deed transfer to Simone. And when Marcus tried to say I wouldn't have known what to do with that kind of money, Reverend Bird interrupted and said, "She knew enough to catch you." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I laid the documents out like cards at a dealer's table, one after another in order, each piece more undeniable than the last. I pointed to the forged email, metadata stripped, sender masked, attachment fabricated, and then to the sequence of transfers from the trust, $120,000, then $95,000, then another $105,000. Each matched to an indulgence: Simone's down payment, the shell company payout, the private lease agreement on the luxury vehicle. I traced every dollar, I said. Each one tied to my name, each one moved without my knowledge. Simone's eyes narrowed, but she didn't speak. Marcus started fidgeting with the pen beside his folder, then looked up with a shrug that didn't match the weight of what he'd done. "I didn't think it'd be that serious," he muttered. "We were going to tell you eventually. You get overwhelmed. You don't even use online banking." "Don't mistake my pace for ignorance," I said. "I've managed households and housing projects longer than you've been breathing. You think knowing how to open an app makes you capable?" He looked like he wanted to disappear into the chair. That's when Reverend Bird stepped in, voice low but sharp. "She knew enough to catch you. She knew enough to build a case that'll stand in court. And she knew enough not to do this alone." Simone scoffed, arms crossed again. "So what now, Gloria? You want us in jail?" I didn't blink. "I want the truth documented, the damage corrected, and every cent returned. If you think that's too harsh, maybe you should have left me something to live on." Mrs. Langston leaned forward. "You took from someone who worked for every inch she has, and then you expected her to stay quiet." No one moved. Outside the church hall window, I watched a car slow roll past, probably someone early for choir rehearsal. Inside, the silence had shape. Thick. Final. I stacked the receipts and folded them into the restitution folder. Marcus's pen finally stilled. Mr. Graves stood, confirmed that the trust would be frozen immediately pending formal investigation, and turned to Simone to say, "Since the transfer was unauthorized and fraud-based, restitution procedures will commence, and all assets will be subject to court recovery." He didn't flinch when he said it. His tone was clinical, but there was something under it. Not anger, not even disgust, but a kind of professional disappointment. The kind that says, "You knew better, and you did it anyway." Simone finally sat down, her heels clicking against the tile as she crossed one leg over the other like she was at a salon, not a legal reckoning. But her eyes lost their edge. Graves opened his briefcase and pulled out a document already prepared, a notice of trustee action suspension, signed and sealed. He handed one copy to me, one to Marcus, and one to Reverend Bird as the clergy witness. "Effective today, no disbursements will be authorized. The trust is frozen until a court-appointed audit is completed. Any funds misappropriated will be subject to lien, garnishment, or seizure, depending on court ruling." Simone didn't touch the document in front of her. Marcus took his with both hands, face drained, mouth set in a line too proud to be afraid and too ashamed to deny. I kept mine flat on the table. I didn't need to read the legal phrasing. I already understood what it meant. For the first time since June, no one else could move $1 of Jonah's money without my say-so. "I'll be filing a notarized affidavit of fraud with the probate court by close of business," Graves continued. "Any attempt to sell, transfer, or conceal assets connected to the trust will be in direct violation of court order. That includes vehicles, property, and any liquid accounts tied to the initial distributions." Simone adjusted her necklace, but her mouth stayed shut. Marcus turned to me, almost childlike. "What are you trying to do to us?" I looked him in the eye. "What you did to me." Reverend Bird closed her folder and stood up. "Meeting adjourned. You'll be contacted by counsel with next steps. I suggest you prepare." No one thanked her. No one spoke. As we gathered our things, I watched Simone reach for her phone, probably checking account balances, probably realizing they'd already begun to vanish. Simone stormed out and Marcus tried to follow, but Reverend Bird stopped him at the door and said, "This isn't how family treats each other." While the room full of witnesses, church members, HOA reps, bank staff, silently absorbed the disgrace. Simone didn't wait for formality. She shoved her chair back, heels scraping hard against the tile, and grabbed her crocodile bag, like it held the last of her leverage. She didn't speak, didn't excuse herself, didn't even look my way. She just walked out, head high, spine stiff, but her steps too fast to be proud. When the glass door slammed behind her, the sound echoed louder than any apology she never gave. Marcus stood next, slower, almost like he was waiting for someone to stop him. He looked at the folder he hadn't touched, and then at me. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then turned to leave. But Reverend Bird stepped in front of him, one palm flat against the wood-paneled exit. "Marcus," she said, calm, low, final. "This isn't how family treats each other." He froze. Behind us, Mrs. Langston adjusted her glasses, took another note. Mr. Graves stood quietly, arms crossed, observing the scene like he'd seen it too many times before. Families torn apart not by greed alone, but by the certainty they'd never be held accountable. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't apologize either. He just looked at me, eyes dull, jaw twitching, like he wanted to say something that might soften the damage, but couldn't find anything honest enough to try. "You could have asked," I said, voice steady, not cold. "You were my son before you were my executor." He nodded, just once, then dropped his gaze and stepped aside. Reverend Bird opened the door and let him pass, but didn't follow him out. Instead, she turned to me and asked quietly, "You need anything else today?" "No," I said. "I've got everything I came for." I gathered the folders, stacked them neatly, slid them back into my case. No drama, no ceremony, just closure. Slow, deliberate, undeniable. Outside, Marcus caught up with Simone at the edge of the church lot. She didn't wait for him. He walked behind her, no hand held, no words exchanged. Inside, we remained calm, collected, watching them retreat, their entitlement unraveling in plain view. By November 10th, the trust was restored under my sole control, restitution began via asset lien, Marcus resigned as co-beneficiary, Simone's Buckhead property was frozen, and Ms. Green at Bank of America handed me a new debit card and a fresh folder. Inside it, the new keys to my own future. It didn't happen all at once. Nothing real ever does. But step by step, I watched my name be pulled back from their ledger and returned to mine. The court clerk called on the 6th, lien placed on the Buckhead property. Official notice delivered to Simone by certified mail. 2 days later, a formal withdrawal letter arrived from Marcus, filed through Graves's office. No apology, no signature, beyond what was legally required. But it was done. His name removed from the trust, access terminated. Mr. Graves sent confirmation via email and overnighted originals. I placed them in the binder under a new tab, Restoration. The relief wasn't joy, not yet. It was more like the sound of a ceiling finally stopping its drip. Not because someone else fixed it, but because I climbed up there myself. On November 10th, I returned to the Moreland Avenue branch, this time not with questions, but with authority. Miss Tasha Green greeted me like an old colleague, not a case number. She already had the folder waiting. Updated account credentials, my signature as sole trustee, and a debit card embossed with my name only. "I'll walk you through the online portal," she said, and she did. Step by step, clear and steady. I took notes, I asked questions. I didn't nod until I understood every screen. Before I left, she handed me one last envelope. Inside was a slim set of keys. "Safe deposit box," she said. "New rental under your name. The original trust documents and certified copies are inside. Only you have access." I walked out of that bank not taller, not younger, not changed into someone else, but returned to myself. The version of me Jonah knew was still in there. Deliberate, sharp, unwilling to let theft dress itself up as protection. At home, I locked the binder away. I opened a new notepad and wrote the first entry. November 10th. Control reestablished. No cosigners, no gatekeepers. Then I sat at my table and began sketching a new budget. Not for survival, but for choice.